Welcome, everyone, to In the Hot Seat. For our repeat viewers, thank you for joining us again. If you're new to the show, every 2 weeks, we put industry experts and our customers in the hot seat for a lively discussion, debate, even some discourse as we humanize the digital experience. All aspects of the customer lifecycle are up for discussion, as well as technologies used throughout each phase of the journey. Now, this is the second episode, so this is a follow-on to our last show, Go-to-Market Strategies, Challenges, and Trends. So, Kristy, what are we going to banter about?
How about go-to-market strategies, challenges?
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
No, actually, I kind of want to banter about how Pete and Dale are not going to get along in this episode.
Oh, no.
I mean, are going to get along.
Sorry. I think they are going to. Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I mean, this is obviously this is a hot topic, and everybody's, interested in all aspects of this. And this time we're focusing a little bit differently on part of the process that we didn't really talk about that much last time. So I think this will be an interesting discussion around, how do we get to know the customer prospect better and try to build that out. So,
yeah. Agreed.
I don't know. Why don't we let them get at it then? If you want to do the intros?
Sure. So first up, we have Dale Zwizinski. He is co-founder of Revenue Reimagined, the exciting part, co-host of the Revenue Reimagined podcast, helping founders bring their products to market through the latest revenue strategies. He has helped founders and startup companies in 7 countries build and scale revenue teams. We also have Pete Smith. Pete is the founder and CEO of SpotLogic, an early stage software company focused on making it radically easier for salespeople to understand and respond to the needs of their customers. You may also recognize him as one of our co-hosts every now and then here on the podcast.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us.
I may also have another co-host coming in, another co-founder from Revenue Reimagined. We're trying to get him on board, but looking forward to the conversation. Pete, I hear you're a tough one, man. Last time you said, I don't know what Pete was going to say. So I look forward to the banter.
Well, I definitely have a perspective on this. I don't know if it's right, but that seems to never matter. So.
Oh, that's not true. That's not true. And we did manage to get Jake with us. Jake is also a co-founder of Revenue Reimagined and I believe the chief growth officer. So welcome on board, Jake. We're glad we got everything working for you.
Yeah, technology is great when it decides to work for us. But finally, we're here. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Well, why don't we jump right in, Kristy? We got a lot of stuff
there, actually, Michael. I'm going to rest my case right there.
Yeah.
What Jake just said is exactly my point. So if we could get the technology to work for us, the end user, then So that's SpotLogic. Thank you for coming. I want to thank our other guests.
Peter, don't be afraid. We won't hurt you too bad.
Well, I'll send you my address for the check in the mail.
So why don't let's start broader and then we can get into the discovery part of the discussion in a little bit. But we talked a lot about different strategies last 2 weeks ago, I guess. And so I'd like to kind of start this with a question around that. So what do you think are the most overlooked but really critical elements when you're working on a winning go-to-market strategy? Dale, you want to start that one?
I'll start it. Okay, I'll put the neck out first. For what I've seen lately, so I think this changes, but what I've seen lately, the most overlooked and critical element of go-to-market is really around understanding the customer and what they're really needing. Like we were actually talking before this on cold calling and how cold calling is just like this blast conversation, whether it's email or phone calls, like this cold calling situation, we're not doing enough to understand what the customer's real needs are. And it actually starts above where like either the investor or the CEO saying we have to hit some kind of random number that they generated. And so if we have a better generated number at the top, we can actually build a proper funnel model and funnel metrics. And now we don't have to do let's do 2,000 calls on a weekly basis. Let's maybe do 200 calls, get really focused, really targeted, and really deliver value for the people that you're trying to sell your product or service to. So I guess there's two parts of it. One is the numbers are most likely unrealistic because they came from the CEO or the CFO or the investor. And two is we're just, as a leadership team, we need to take a step back and say, if conversion rates are better with more personalization, we should be going down that path.
Well, I guess I'll jump in with a little bit higher level perspective, and then I'll double underscore what you just said. The one thing I think that is critical in go-to-market is sort of really understanding what your unique perspective is on the market. If you have the same perspective everybody else does, then I mean, don't even bother. It's just not worth the venture capital. It's not worth your time, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to have this sort of unique perspective on what's missing and what would make a difference. And then that sort of makes it easy to say, okay, well, this is not what we do, and that's not what we do. So we can hone in on what Dale was just talking about. And I think the other, just as a quick comment on sort of this outreach thing and like driving up the numbers and activity. I don't know who's got the background noise, but I am not also running the vacuum cleaner now. So
it sounded a little like that.
Just wanted you to know I'm not that much of a multitasker. The other thing that strikes me about that whole sort of inside sales kind of thing is that I learned everything I need to know about sales from Groucho Marx, and he said, I never would want to be part of a group that would have me as a member, right? And it seems like the people that you can get to from an inside sales standpoint are always the people that can do you absolutely no good. They're the people who will talk to me, and if I'm being pressured to have 100 calls a day, then what do you think the salesperson's going to do? They're going to game the system, and they're going to get their 100 calls in to get the management pressure off of me, whether that actually solves what we're trying to achieve or not. So you have to know who you are, and then you have to be sort of realistic, like Dale was saying, about what is it we should do to pull that off.
I mean, Pete, you've heard me say this before, but that's been one of my big criticisms of sales tech for quite a while. Is that I think over the last 10 years, we built tools that take what's not working and make it better, more, faster, and not actually trying to get to the root of the problem. And that's a problem.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't even think, I agree with you, Pete. And then there's part of me, it's like, I don't even know that you have to have a unique perspective on the market. You just have to have better execution. And I've seen a lot of great companies come out here and, for example, look at call recording, right? You've got companies who came in way at the beginning, like Chorus, and then Gong hit the market, and then now there's Fathom. They all have similar perspectives, but there was one true winner, and the key thing there that you watched that they accomplished was they out-executed all the competition. And so I absolutely think having a strong perspective is critical. I don't know that you have to have a different perspective.
So I think that's a good point in terms of, there can be one company that succeeds with that strategy, better execution, right? The second, who is the winner of those three? Microsoft?
Definitely not.
It seems like that's just like spell check now. Like, oh, I can record your conversations, and then I can use that as another cudgel against a salesperson. And you said too many times, and that's like there's already so much negativity in the job of sales that like automating even more of that to me just seems like it's not probably the right thing to do. And the other, this is something I was talking to my son about earlier today, who's a sales guy, and just the notion of, and I see the benefit, trust me, I see the benefit of having a transcription of your meeting. So we don't need to talk about the value of that. What I'm questioning questioning is the right word. Like I'm looking to understand, is there a negative side to that? And is the negative side, does that outweigh the positive side? So if I just think of myself as a buyer and I'm talking to two different salespeople, And one person says, "Can I record this meeting?" And the next salesperson never brings that up, has no intention of doing it, et cetera, et cetera. Who do I prefer right off the bat? The person who can't take their own notes or is treating this conversation as a commodity, or somebody who is listening to me? We're clearly, this person's interested in what I have to say and is capturing that information. And to me, forget the privacy. Like, when I was calling on Goldman Sachs, they wouldn't let me record anything. Like our trading strategy we're coming to you for help with is now in the cloud somewhere. Are you out of your mind? So that, to me, if you think, just one more quick point, and then I'll get off my soapbox. When we came up in sales, the best thing you could do from your manager's perspective is get that customer out for lunch, get him out for a drink, get him out for dinner, to go take that guy to play golf, take him to a sports event, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why was that so relished? Because you would learn things you wouldn't learn in a meeting, right? And those things became crucial to you winning that deal. So if I was going to write a book on sales, I could get it down to a single sentence, which is, it's very difficult to win a deal as an outsider looking in. And that's a good point. That's what that whole point. That's my whole point of this. Do we want to commoditize the relationship? And so I just one quick point. I got to get my son's thing in here because it's so good. I was talking about, is that what CRM, customer relationship management, is? It seems like you're undermining the customer relationship with this management software. And he goes, "Oh, crumb." Wow. Sorry, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to answer your question. Which rep I would prefer would be the rep that's actually hitting their number. So, like, whether they record a call or don't record a call. Like,
no, I meant as the customer. As the customer, who do you want to do business with?
I think it depends on what generation you're in, because I think, like, nowadays most people are used to being recorded. They understand it. I understand, like, the Goldman Sachs, like, high end, those types of things. Okay, fine. But I can tell you, every conversation I come off of, we use a recording technology. My recaps are like spot on, sent out within 24 hours with a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to be doing together. If I was the buyer, I'd rather have someone really be dedicated to getting all this stuff done that I can do on the next part of it. So, but you do have to have active listening, genuine conversations, like all of those pieces are definitely needed. But I don't think a recorder or not a recorder would push me off as a buyer.
Same here. I think if that's what you're focusing on, you might be missing the point with, like, what you're focusing on as a buyer to evaluate, do you trust this individual as someone who guides you through the pitfalls of their purchasing process? Like, I don't think a recorder is going to do that for me.
So yeah, I don't see the connection between recording somebody and them guiding you through a transaction. Like, to me, those are two totally different things. Like, that's the missing piece.
I think you just made the point.
We're not doing enough of the guiding.
Yeah, you're right. There's nothing correlated, so it's not that big of a concern.
Well, no, it's correlated with another negative outcome. What I was talking about was that if a salesperson is going to add value to this relationship. So I think of the sales process as a value chain of interactions, and each one of those interactions sort of earns you the next interaction, right? And if the value that the buyer is looking for from you is a recap of the meeting they were just in, I mean, that's a pretty low bar. And by the way, everybody's going to have that. Right?
But I don't think anyone's arguing that point. I think that's a moot point right there, because I think we're all in agreement. The idea that a sales rep does a proper job listening, understanding, asking the right questions, recapping what they're understanding in conversations, and earning the right to have your trust, that has nothing to do with the recorder, right? That has everything to do with the expertise that individual has developed about understanding your business, your space that you're in, and their professionalism. And that's what I think what you're saying. I think that's what we're all saying, is what a buyer is looking for to have a trusted seller to be working with.
Michael, we better get on to the second question. We'll be on.
I know. I was thinking we could, or like the other half of the first one. I don't know. Maybe we'll. No. Go ahead, Kristy.
Well, so I'm afraid to ask this one
Do
actually.
you have a question about Crumb?
I do not have a question about Crumb. Could you share some examples of highly successful yet unconventional go-to-market approaches that have disrupted their industries? And we should probably stay away from AI recording of meetings.
Pete, you go first. You give us a good example.
Well, I think Slack is the best example today. I mean, they do a number of things that I think are sort of in the immediate gratification area, which I think, no salesperson's ever got immediate gratification from CRM. Like that, to me, that's the thing that's going to capture people's attention is what value can you create for me in the smallest space of time, right? So one thing that I know that they were a pivot from a gaming company, and they turned out to be just release a sort of messaging product. But when they did that, they simplified it to, sort of its core. And they also took advantage of this network effect thing where, it's like a fax machine where it's only good if somebody else has a fax machine. So the growth comes from this organic sort of view as to what it is they were going to build in the first place and getting to market first. And then the execution, it's interesting. I think if you sort of line it up correctly, the execution sort of takes care of itself, because it is this organic thing where the first mover has this massive advantage. So I'll use them as my example.
Cool. Dale?
Jake, you want to go next?
Oh, Jake.
I got one for you. If you need a minute, I got one.
Riff it. I'm here.
I think one of the things that's super I don't think it's underrated, because I think the people that are doing this right are like killing it. But I think only like 2% of the people are doing it right. And that's like there's many names for it, but I'll start on the community side. So many of these communities have people in them, from executives all the way down to salespeople, SDRs, and people are having conversations about pricing, product feature functionality, what's working, what's not working. And like, if you're not in there as a seller, then you're missing out. Like when they call you, they're calling you to give you the RFP for all the stuff that they just got from their buddy down the road that can give you everything you need to ask a question on the technology and why it's not working. And so I'll roll that into the second part of it, which is a buddy of mine, Jared Fuller, just wrote this Nearbound book, and it's the same type of thing, but Nearbound. So community is one part of Nearbound, but Nearbound across the organization, from customer success, the BDRs, marketing, everyone, like leverage your network. This isn't something new. This isn't like groundbreaking. Like, oh my God, build a relationship. Pete, you were just saying this earlier, like bring them out to dinner, bring them golfing, like the relationship, like this isn't something new. The challenge becomes now buyers are making decisions much sooner. Like by the time they get to you, they're already making decisions. They're making those decisions in these sales and marketing communities that they can ask technology questions, and they know the price before they even ask you the price. So when you tell them the price, they already know your price. And then when they know your price, they're going to like just negotiate you, or they'll just not even take your call. So like, I think you have to be super cautious as a vendor nowadays, and you should be in these communities doing some analysis on what people are talking about. So that's one I got. What do you got, Jake?
Yeah, actually, my head went was actually, I was thinking like, the go to network Nearbound concept, but I think it's underrated, not because it's new and nobody knows about it, but I think it's just because it's another word for saying networking, right? And so I think the idea in general, people have figured like, oh yeah, that's just a general part of what I need to be doing. But I think the concept in general of networking has changed to a point that Pete made earlier. Like, why are we afraid of getting together in person, whether it's with our clients or with our peers or with our partners? It's just not a lot of that is happening like the way it used to be. And so I think there's a new challenge of how are people interacting and connecting and communicating online that's different than the way they used to do it in the past, whether it's Slack groups or others. And so I think it's just understanding how to take this concept of networking, Nearbound, go to network, whatever it is, and leverage it for the way it's being done today.
So I think that's a great point. I think the thing that's most striking to me is that what is being done, while networking seems to be totally different. Used to be, I know these people and I can use that information to introduce them to somebody else, as opposed to they're helping me, they're collaborating with me sort of on a buyer journey. That's a very much more robust kind of a thing that we're sharing information about it. I'm just guessing, just based on watching my own kids, but the way that kids help each other, all use the exact same, Netflix account across their entire fraternity in one case, or I'm not telling you which one of my boys is doing that, but anyway, they just find ways to sort of hack the system. And I think that's now spilling over into sort of the business world, where these communities are a way to sort of hack the system where they're not pursuing. It used to be that, the only chance you had to learn about IBM products was to get an IBM salesperson in the door. And just over the last 50 years, that's been less and less true. And this is just sort of the next iteration of that, where they don't need you at all for lots and lots and lots of different purchases. And the salespeople are sort of being relegated to only the most complex, situations.
What about the parts of go-to-market that aren't sales?
They need to be integrated. There needs to be an integrated approach on go-to-market. So we've talked a lot about this with our buddies, GTM partners, and they have a whole operating system around making sure that you're bringing marketing into sales, into success, and even looping product into it. Just like sales is in these communities, marketing should be in them, customer success, because you want to hear what your customers are saying about your product. So, we need to make sure, once again, I don't know if I talked about this in the last show, but we have churn. So churn's happening. There's a big thing with churn. People are trying to figure out, do I have budget for this? Is this overlapping? And then we're blaming customer success. We're why is customer success having all this churn? And it's well, if you look at the account or you look at the customer, maybe it's really the wrong ICP. So it may have nothing to do with customer success, and they're just getting everything that's rolling downhill. Versus from a customer success perspective, to say, here's a fragment of people that are churning. They all look like the same ICP. Maybe we shouldn't sell to them, right? And that needs to go back into marketing and sales. And then sales has to make sure that we're selling the right products at the right features and functionality for the person. And then product needs to make sure it's delivering. So a churn customer could be marketing, could be sales, could be CS, or it may just be the product in general. Maybe we promise a customer that we're going to have XYZ feature, and 6 months into it, they still don't have it. So at 12 months, they're churning because they don't trust you anymore.
Well, let's dig into this a little bit more, because this is a great setup for kind of the next part of the discussion around around discovery and really trying to understand your customer. So I first, just kind of a general question, what's the role of discovery in the process, and how can technology help you be more effective at discovery, or can it?
So I'll start with, I guess, the first thing I want to say is that it seems like all the 50, 100 sales books I have around here either don't talk about discovery. They assume the salesperson already knows everything they need to know, which is insane. Or they think of it as some discrete step in some longer process. And I think anybody who's got any experience would say that, no, you're discovering and you're conveying information, you're discovering, conveying, all through that value chain of interactions, there's discovery at every step of the process. So, I mean, that's one big thing I think that has to be sort of appreciated by sales organizations. And then I think, the thing you could do is use technology to help salespeople ask the best set of questions in every situation that they're in. And I think the disconnect between, methodologies like MEDDIC and, MEDDPICC was the big revolution on top of MEDDIC. Okay, we should also include the paper process and competition and what it is we gather. The disconnect was that how executable is that? How sales consumable is the idea that you should learn this information? So I think that's the bridge that needs to be created. There is, okay, there's the set of stuff that we should be doing. Does the salesperson have the ability to ask the right question at the right time? And the most important part of that, I think, is in this context. So if you're selling storage equipment and you're selling it for one use case, like archive versus weather forecasting, that is a completely different set of conversations across the entire value chain. Just that one variable. And there's other variables that can create that much difference in the things that you really need to know to build this system that allows them to do weather forecasting versus archive. So I think those are the things. If you're going to help the salesperson, it's got to be highly contextualized help. It can't be motherhood and apple pie. You should learn whether this person has got the money to buy or what their compelling event is. It's way beyond that to resonate with salespeople, the end user, which goes back to what Jake said when we first started, right? Does the technology work for me? If I could just get it to work, then that would make all the difference I need.
Michael, can you, sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to say, that's the key, is that if it seems like we keep going to the 10-yard line on a lot of these technologies, and that's why the close rate's still 26%, across the nation, as opposed to having eked up anything, or after 28 years of CRM, or pick any other technology.
You're getting that big of a close rate? Jeez.
Michael, can you go back and clarify the question? What was the original question you asked around discovery?
So what's the role of discovery in the sales process? And then I ask if you thought technology could help in some way, and what would that be to make discovery a more effective part of the process?
And we're not talking about AI recording tools, right?
We've decided that we've gone beyond AI recording.
We'll park that for a second.
Yeah, let's put that one away.
Here's what I'll say. I think deals are won and lost in the discovery call. That's where it happens. If a rep doesn't know how to run a proper discovery conversation, they're going to have to repeat the discovery process over and over and over again, because they didn't ask the important questions, or they didn't earn the right to ask the important questions early on in the conversation, to where now they're going to have to uncover challenging elements of their buying process later on. The biggest thing I keep noticing over and over again, whether it was the reps I hired and coached, or reps that I'm coaching now with some of my clients, they really struggle to get to the meat of the conversation, understanding the buyer's current state, future state, and the real cap of the implication of that pain, or dollarizing that pain or the problem in between. And because they struggle asking those real key questions, later on, they find themselves having to continue running discovery. If they did it right up front, then they can really ultimately work with the buyer to basically project manage the deal. And I think that's where the biggest issue occurs, is not actually understanding up front that the deal is won or lost there, and do it right the first time. Does technology help? Absolutely. I think technology always can help us. It just is, if we're using it for our benefit, or if we don't know how to use it, then don't use it. But I think there are multiple tools out there that can help, that can give insight to that process. There are really great tools out there that can actually provide real-time insight into the types of questions that should be asked in a discovery conversation, or measure sentiment of the buyer in the conversation and guide a rep to the piece of content that should be shared at a relevant point in the conversation. So I think it's like an Iron Man suit. If we know how to put it on and we know how to leverage it, then I think we can become exponentially more effective. But if we're fumbling with it, it's not a benefit.
If you don't know how to do discovery before technology, you're definitely not going to know how to do discovery after technology.
Right. You're just going to accelerate the suck.
Yeah. Accelerate the suck.
The suck. Okay. I think that we need to use that somewhere. You have to accelerate accelerate the suck. Yeah. So, okay. So beyond the obvious, what are some of the subtle ways that a strong discovery process establishes trust? I mean, you talked about maybe you haven't earned the right to ask those really important questions, or the ones that really matter. So, how does your discovery process establish that trust? How does it build that foundation for a successful long-term client relationship?
I'll start, and then we'll let Pete go. We'll let Jake go. Maybe we'll go. Jake, you go first. You haven't talked first yet.
Oh, I just finished. Well, okay, I'll talk first. Fine. The question. So getting to how does it earn it, right? I think the biggest thing, you've heard me say a couple of times, you got to earn the right. I think earning the right comes with coming into the conversation with the research that you've done and making that very obvious up front. Also, I think it's I think it's great to start conversations from the very beginning with your buyer with a framework right from the gate. Come in and establish why you're there, establish how much time you have together, set an end goal with the buyer where you want to go with that conversation, and then discuss the agenda and make sure that you've cleared the air. Just coming from the beginning of the conversation and discovery and establishing that you're a professional who knows how to run a discovery call takes a lot of pressure and stress off your buyer. Because I'll tell you this, if your buyer doesn't see that you know how to run that call, they will take control of the call from you. They will take it away from you and they will tell you exactly what they want to see. And at that point, as a rep, you have lost control of the conversation because the buyer doesn't trust you at the time that you've established with them to run that call. But if you do it right and you earn the trust, and then the questions that you ask are clearly demonstrating you've done your research, you've done your homework, you have an expertise in it, you know the space well, that's how you earn trust, not by asking your buyer from the very beginning of the conversation what's their job and what's their role and how long have they been there. If you can look that up on LinkedIn, you're messing up.
Go ahead, Pete. What you got?
Thanks, Dale. So the thing that Jake just said was the word trust, and so the question that I think is central is, so I'm asking this of the salesperson or sales management. Do you understand what you're asking the buyer to say yes to from the buyer's perspective? And if you can't say yes to that, like, I understand the implications of this thing I'm trying to sell you to the way that you're going to run this and the way that, DevOps works there and the way that this could be implemented and so on. All of these factors, that's where the buyer is coming from. And I think that the discovery in the past has been very sort of focused on how do I sell this product to this person, as opposed to how do I help them make this decision where they feel confident in the decision. And the way that they're going to feel confident is because I, as a salesperson, am not talking about just my product, but I'm talking about the impact it could make to their organization and the various aspects to owning this thing. So in my own example, I sold something to a hedge fund years ago, and because of the complexity of the product, it required the whole product to be brought down to upgrade its operating system. And that process could take 48 hours. And that was intolerable to the customer. But we didn't know that until they had owned it for 6 months or 9 months. And, that just never came up from the buyer, and it didn't come up from us. We didn't even think that far ahead that particular aspect of owning it was critical to their business process, their theory of business, as opposed to other people, even in their own industry. So in that case, all of that equipment got yanked out of there 9 months later. And that was something that obviously you don't want to leverage, you don't want it to happen again. So this information that exists sort of at the beginning part of a sales process needs to be robust enough so that you're ensuring sort of this customer success at the end. Like, you can't bolt customer success on the back of something you sold incorrectly. That's just not going to help the situation.
That's true.
Yeah, I love that. I think I think getting back to fundamentals. Like, how do you get back to fundamentals? Because we're trying to do all these exotic things in discovery, but if you're genuinely curious and you're just like not asking a list of questions, like, okay, let's just because Medic says I got to ask like these questions, I'm going to like rapid fire them. And I see this happen, especially with like new reps. They say like, I get all these questions in, instead of like taking the conversation and making it a story and like getting the information like a little bit at a time. And oh, by the way, you may have to have several calls to get all the information. So
that's right.
The other thing I see that happens a lot is like they think they have to get all the questions on the first time, and like the buyer's like, why am I being interrogated? Like,
exactly.
Let's not do interrogation.
Yeah.
Let's like create a story, get the most important data to make sure like, yes, they're going to fall in, you're going to be able to deliver value. And you can, you don't need to ask all the questions the first time you have a conversation with them. So that's what I'd say.
It goes back to what Jake said earlier. It's about earning the right to ask sort of the next set. And It is this give and take, and there is definitely an upper limit to the number of questions you can ask any person. You know, if you've got a great relationship and there's trust there already, then you've got, you know, more of insider status and you can ask more questions. But if you're an outsider looking in, you've got to be creating value right out of the gate with those questions, and creating value for the customer, not yourself. I mean, that's the key. You got to be making them think about, okay, they've already decided what they're going to buy, but do they really understand their own needs? And have they come to the right conclusion, and helping them rethink how they got to what their current set of biases are, or current decision is, can be very valuable. And that's why McKinsey gets paid so much money, you know, to do what they do, because that's sort of the approach that they take, as opposed to peddling a product, right? So
I'm wondering, you know, with all the technology and all the methodologies that have come on the scene lately, has the art of storytelling in sales been lost or degraded?
No, because I think there's a lot of amazing tools out there that are actually helping tell that story, right? So there's a lot of it really cool interactive. So for example, I worked at a startup in the past called Tiled, right? Tiled.co. Tiled is a way of creating interactive presentations and content pieces that are choose your own adventure for the buyer. They can allow the buyer to go down any path, or the seller who's navigating the conversation with the buyer to choose their own adventure in the conversation, to actually navigate a nonlinear conversation with a nonlinear presentation. That's storytelling in its like greatest element, right? So I think just as much as technology is maybe automating or, you know, creating such a rigid process, it's also empowering creativity and conversation. And I think conversation is much more powerful than consumption. We just need to use the right tools to empower it.
yeah, in that case, you're having a conversation with a machine, basically, right? But it's more like a game than it is a storytelling. It's more interactive, so it's more immersive, and you know, you have more control as an audience member, and so that's really interesting. So it's not that storytelling is going away; it's just getting more channels, if you will, more ways of communicating a story, and that's where you start to say, okay, well, marketing technology is sort of taking over some of the things that a salesperson might do traditionally, and you can get this story from more and more avenues now, and that's why this marketing and sales thing is coming together, from at least from the buyer's perspective. You know, that's, they're looking at the company. They're not looking at, this is the marketing part of XYZ company and this is the sales part. They're just trying to get their needs met.
Yeah, I think storytelling is one of the things that differentiates a lot of salespeople. Like I always thought the best salespeople were good marketers, and the best marketers were good salespeople, because they actually you do have to tell a story, but you have to be, it's not necessarily convincing, but really mapping what you deliver for value into what they need. It's like a needle in a haystack sometimes, but like when you make that connection, like it's so obvious. So like if we can get more of those connections made, and you can tell that story in a way that people can digest it, because that's the other thing. Like I hear stories that are being told, and I'm like halfway through the conversation, I'm like, I don't even know what you sell or what you do. Like, so you got to make it digestible for people and not have them rambling on into like abyss.
It's true.
Well, I've been excited to ask this next question. I was holding off for a little bit, but just for Jake, I wanted to toss this one out there. What's the best way to capture and analyze insights from a discovery call? And are there tools or methods that make this process more efficient and effective for both the rep and the team?
Here's my pad of paper. And there's a pen here somewhere. I haven't used it in so long that I don't know where it is. I think it's a blend of the old and new, right? I literally have like stacks of my notes that I take from my conversations for context or for real-time conversation, because no AI is going to replace my ability to recall parts of the conversation, go back and you know, mirror something that was just shared. Or one thing I personally do on calls with buyers is I write down emotional words, right? Like triggers that I want to make sure that I go back and I reference like, hey, you said this was real headache. Tell me more, right? I can't do that with AI in the conversation. That's just part of, experience of doing this and realizing something that works well for me. So yes, there's the traditional approaches, but wow, if you're missing out on the benefits of using AI, I feel for you, because it is something that has really not only accelerated my sales experience and my buyer sales conversations that I have, but also it has empowered the way I coach sellers that I work with. I know, like some Pete may alluded to the fact that reps feel like another thing that Big Brother is kind of recording me and like it feels uncomfortable, but in fact, there's a lot of reps that I've worked with over the years who went from that feeling to quickly coming to me, knocking on my door saying, hey, Jake, could you sit down with me for 5 minutes and watch this portion of the clip? What did I miss? And that's powerful when a rep sees that a coaching conversation can come from technology as well. It's not there to Big Brother you. It's there to actually strengthen you, empower you, and help you. So I think the key there is like, how are we using it? And are we using it the right way?
And I'll go back to a little bit of pen and paper. One thing I like to do besides recording calls is actually mind mapping. So a lot of times I'll mind map stuff on a call and just take little bits and pieces here and there, and then go back and flush it all out. So I'll do some of that. I'll also fall back on the recording pieces just because, like, I can't, especially if I'm by myself, it's impossible. So when I was a sales engineer for a while. So I used to always take the notes for the salesperson so they could actually do a lot of sales work, and it got me into good habits. But as a salesperson, as a sales engineer, I'd expect the same, or a BDR, to try to train up the BDR to be a better sales rep. But having the call recording just allows me to have the fallback. What did I miss? If I missed something as I was taking down another note. And going back to what Jake said, like, the biggest challenge that reps are having today is they're not coached properly. And even with all these recordings, Gong and all this stuff, like, there's people putting technology on top of Gong just to do better coaching, just because Gong doesn't do a great job of coaching. So we record all these calls, we have this library of data. Like, it's almost like we're in like data overload. So we have so much data that they can't, like, if they get to 5 calls, like, the leader would be on calls all day. So there is a challenge in that space, but to me, it's up to the sales reps to own that recap. And I can tell you, Pete, so the other part of this, I've coached thousands of reps. I can tell you on one hand how many people actually do a really good recap that's going to, like, have a good conversation with the customer. And it's like, it's such a small percentage that actually do proper recaps and make sure, like, hey, not just thanks for joining the call, it was great to have you on the call. It's like, no, that's not what you want to have happen. It's like, here are all the action items. Here's what I understood. Did I miss anything? Like, in getting into the detail, once again, building that relationship outside of like having to go play golf with them.
Can I just share one last thought here? Just really quick, really one small anecdote from a different perspective too. I have ADHD and I have dyslexia. I wasn't actually diagnosed with dyslexia until later on in my life. It was about 1.5 years ago. It was a game changer for me when I was able to have call recordings that helped me craft an email. Someone with dyslexia, sometimes if you don't understand, you don't understand. But to sit down and take an hour to an hour and a half to go through the anxiety of crafting an email that should be simple for most people, it is really difficult. And I'm damn good at my job and I'm really good at selling, but I'm not great at writing an email because I struggle with a disability. And so from an accessibility perspective, these tools also are game changers for sellers and giving them opportunities to do something that they might otherwise struggle with.
Pete, that's a tough one to follow up on. I don't know what you're going to
do now. Yeah, that's a little bit unfair. But my perspective was from the customer's point of view, not the end users. I think I prefaced what I said was, I totally get the value of this for me. It's what is it doing to the nature of the customer relationship that I was inquiring about, and does that outweigh the other alternative? So that's where I come down on this.
All right. I think we have time for one. Oh, go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think the one thing Jake said that I think is really important, and so I'll just bring it out again because it plays right into what you just said, Pete, and the value for that customer is in that really complete recap from the call. so that they understand that we understand and that we're on the same page. So good answer, Jake. And that really does help, I think, in my mind, help think through why is this useful. And I admit, I use a call recorder all the time, whether it's a sales call or an advisory call, whatever. So.
All right. Well, with that, actually, I think we are at time. So that is all the time we have today. But thank you so much, gentlemen. You survived the hot seat. And anybody else out there, if you think you have what it takes to be in the hot seat, let us know. We would love to hear from you.
I don't think anybody's going to want to be on this after that.
I think it
I don't know. You got to
on,
be careful of Pete.
Yeah, right. Things depends on whether we put Pete on the seat. That's your episode for today. Thanks so much for being with us this week. I'm Kristy Tupper.
And I'm Michael Fauscette. Yeah, thanks, guys. Tune in next time for different faces, different topics, different perspectives as we put somebody else in the hot seat.